Nobody else could understand me, and I was too scared to talk about what I had gone through, too ashamed to talk about what I had gone through.
I came from nothing to achieve Olympic success, and now I'm back to square one. What in the hell's going on?
If you're having a hard time finding what to grab onto, serve somebody. We met at the where?
Band camp.
Band camp. Yeah, way back in the day. This one time band camp. Right, we met up at our Park City office, and you were talking. The reason why I was so like, you have a story that's captivating, I think, and the reason I'm even here, like while we're talking, and just is because I think there are so many people that are out there, so many people that have experiences like you and I have had, right, in our lives, but are too nervous or too, I don't know, ashamed. I know I felt that level of shame where I just don't even want to tell anybody about anything in my life, right? Or they're scared, or they're anything, but they're not talking, and it's, to me, that like keeping that inside was killing me at one point, right? Not able to like let that go. And so when I heard you talk about the things that you've gone through, I thought to myself, holy crap, man. I mean, obviously you've done things at a much bigger, much higher stage than I ever have in my life, right? But also I think that for you, it's what I connected with was that the lows were still like, you can be high and you can still reach a low that is, that is life changing.
Yeah.
Right. And then you can do something to fix that again, right? And so I wanted just to chat with you a little bit sort of about how that all started. And I think one of the things that I was really blown away by was where you started, right, as a kid, right? You were kind of, so tell me just a little bit about like how you came up through, through the challenges you even started with.
Yeah. It's, and, great topics there too, right? I so resonate with the whole conversation where people hold that inside, and I'm blessed enough that I get to work with a lot of people that do that. And then I also get to represent those people that don't feel like they have a voice, right? And so by me being the vulnerable person, sharing my stories that most people are too scared to share, I get to stand up there and share this story, and then they can connect with it and be like, man, if he's able to tell a story, then I should be able to tell my story too. And that just came from, again, going back, to childhood. In my world, we always say the creative mind in the adult is a child that survived. And as a child, even though I was in a chaotic space with a drug addict mom on and off the streets, in the system, 17 foster homes, and saw some of the worst of the worst that you could ever see as a kid, I was still this kid who was always curious, right? And always interested in what's next and what's possible for me as a kid. And that came from have to be curious because I didn't have the guidance for my parents. But it took time. It is what it is. I got in trouble a lot as a kid. I was following those footsteps. But when I eventually got exposed to a different environment, not the drugs, not the street life, not the cops, and not, all these different things. That's why I realized, wow, but there's more to life than what I was experiencing. There's an, untapped potential that I have as this young kid. And as a kid, when most kids are thinking about going out and playing and doing games, I was trying to think of like, how can I get better as a person and human being? And thinking with the end in mind, like, what do I want to do? I was seventh grade when this thought process came about. But what do I want to do in high school? What do I want to do past high school? Eventually, someday I'm going to be a parent. What do I want to represent as a father to my kids? And just really taking a hard look at that and trying to figure out, what are the things I don't want in life, right? And what I didn't want is I didn't want to grow up like, the lifestyle that my mom was providing. And, not bad on her. She was a drug addict. She had an addiction, just took over her life and really impacted everything around her. I didn't want to be a gangbanger. I didn't want to be a drug addict. I didn't want to be a drug dealer. I didn't want to be an alcoholic. There's all these things I didn't want. So if that was the case, let's, again, think with the end in mind down the road, and how do we reverse engineer that to come up with a strategic game plan to actually get there? And don't get me wrong, I wasn't thinking that at seventh grade, but I was trying to go about going to coaches and teachers and say, hey, I want to change my starts. I don't want to grow up and do these same things and continue to get in trouble and continue to have, all F's and a D minus for grades and be the kid that everyone looks negatively at. What do I got to do? And thankfully, some coaches and some teachers were willing to take me under their wing and start to show me the foundational building blocks it takes to be a successful human being, first and foremost. And I just really attached to that and got even more curious. And that's what led me to obviously getting involved with sports and then doing well at sports. Man, I was like on cloud nine, right? I felt like I belonged to something bigger than myself. And it was completely different than running the streets and ding banging and getting in trouble, right? It was like, man, I ran the 100 and all these kids and the fans were cheering. And that was a dopamine hit that I just never let go of.
Well, you realize, I mean, pretty early on that you had an ability athletically that most people just aren't blessed with. Right. And so, I mean, that can create an addiction all by itself,
Yeah.
but a good addiction, right? To something that's healthy and, fulfilling and good, for you and the people around you.
Yeah. Like I always tell people joking around, I was like, well, I was really good at like running from cops and jumping fences. So I took that negative experience as a kid and flip it and try and turn it into a positive experience and then apply it right to athletics. Right. And again, once I got a taste of, running track and understanding like what it was, team dynamics and all these amazing things that I just never knew existed, I was super addicted to it in a good way, and just realized that that was an avenue for me to escape the chaos that I was born into. And just realizing, we live in an omnipotent world and there's so many opportunities around us. I just have to pay attention to the ones that resonate with me and go for it.
Did you find at that time, though, that the life that you were working to walk away from still tried pulling on you?
Oh, it still pulls on me today.
Yeah.
And I think that's the misconception people think. They're like, if I do the work, I'm going to leave all that behind. Right. And, whether you're spiritual or you're not spiritual, there are forces in this world that are always going to try to pull you back down down that negative lane. The whole purpose of doing the work and getting to a place where you feel like you're authentic, you're being a great human being, you're falling in alignment is so that you can manage those things in your life and what's right from wrong. I mean, you don't fall into those stupid, categories of making mistakes because you just know better, right?
Yeah.
And it's and taking that 100% accountability for your own life. Because we see it all the time. People like, oh, I didn't mean to be that. Well, then why'd you do it?
Right.
You do better.
Yeah.
So let's take some accountability. But yeah, I mean, it's super, super blessed. And again, those negative forces, whether you want to call them evil forces or whatever, they are constantly on your doorstep. They constantly.
It's good to hear. Like, I think people need to know that, right? Because like on April 29th of this year, and this is my 20th year of not taking a drink.
Yeah.
And I'm a gutter drooling drunk if I drink.
Yeah.
Right. Just completely. But I tell her what, and I think it surprises people that every single day for 20 years almost, I have thought about drinking alcohol
Oh,
every day.
absolutely. And we talked about, that's the other thing we connected, right? I think my wife and I decided to go, go down the path of sobriety together, which is really weird for a couple, right? We say, oh, couples can't do it together. And we are a couple that defied the odds, but we're 2.5 years, almost 3 years into it now. And I mean, I constantly, when things get stressful, sometimes I'm like, oh man, maybe I just one drink. But the reality is, again, like we've both done that work. And before the thoughts do come up all the time, before I decide to like make that move, I always think again, you'll hear me say this a lot, with the end in mind, what could possibly happen if I take that one drink, right? And let's reflect on the past.
Yeah.
Right. You were never successful as an alcoholic. You thought you were, right? But the reality is you weren't. And so that's a constant reminder for me is like, you know what? Don't get me wrong. I enjoy a drink. I enjoy going out with my friends and drinking and being silly and doing stupid stuff, but I don't enjoy the end result from all that stuff. And that's what keeps me away.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I look back, your mind filters your past pretty well.
Yeah.
Right. It filters out a lot of the things that you did that you don't really want to take back. So you filter those out and you look back and you think of all the great times when I was drinking or when you're partying, having a good time out with your buddies, but you're right. Like the end result oftentimes gets filtered. We only remember the good things. And that was maybe about 20% or less of what was happening back then. There, probably less than that. 10% of it was fun, and the rest of it was awful.
Yeah, right. Because it was only like the time you were out, right? And then you're the rest of that night, and the next day you wake up and you're like, oh man, this really sucks.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I again, totally resonate with that of just, not wanting, and my wife and I talk about it a lot too, right? And she has stressful days and she's like, today pushed me to the edge, but I chose not to do it again, right? And it's that ability to, you know, we're given this amazing gift of choice, right? And we need to use it more often, and especially in situations like that. Because I think of like when I stopped drinking 2.5 years ago, man, I was at my lowest point in life. We've talked a little bit about my mental health back then. I was suicidal, so on and so on. And, when I stopped drinking and started getting clarity and started putting the pieces together and started getting mentors and coaches to work with, since then, I've been able to create so much. And there's just absolutely no way that I would give up what I've created since then to go back to that.
let's talk about that because I think like your particular journey took you to one of the highest platforms in the world, right?
Yeah.
And then to one of the lowest places in your life also. So let's talk about that because I think to me it's incredible to hear that story.
Yeah. So folks who are listening, what he's talking about is, I wrapped up my sports career as a 3-time Olympic silver medalist with Team USA. Was able to do some amazing things and travel the world and White House visits and fundraisers and hang out with superstars and all that, all that people think that happens. And it was a lot of fun. But when I retired in 2010, I had a massive loss of identity because I didn't know what was next, and no one was there to help prepare me for it. There was no transition program. I wasn't thinking while I was on tour that year, oh, hey, where am I going to go work at next year? Right. It was just focusing on making the Olympics and doing the best you can to represent Team USA. And when all that was done, I didn't know what to do. I was completely lost. I was in foreign land. I felt like I was on Mars. I didn't feel like anybody understood me. And that started the negative path of 8.5 years from 2010 till 2018 of victim mentality. The blame game, it's everyone else's fault. Why is no one helping me? Yelling at God, getting mad at him because my life sucked. And I was, an alcoholic. I was, a weekend warrior addict. I ruined all my relationships, including, my ex-wife, my son's mom, my relationship with my kids, 3 DUIs, 2 aggravated assaults with a deadly weapon. It got so bad, it got to the point where a friend of mine who's a judge up in Ogden basically said, hey, you know what, Billy, I love you. You've had a great career, but this right here is going to like be the end of you if you don't figure it out. And he says, unfortunately, if you don't end up dead, I'm the one who's going to have to send you to prison because you just keep getting in trouble time and time again. And, I was so hopeless and just didn't know what to do and super confused and super depressed. And that's, I was blowing $600-700 a day in alcohol, going to the bar, partying, and to no end. I mean, blackout drunk all the time. Waking up in places that how the hell did you hear? And, sometimes that was jail. And, it was definitely one of the worst times in my life.
Where does your mind go during that?
Yeah, I was almost homeless, and it was victim mentality,
Yeah.
100% victim mentality. Like, why is this happening to me? Right. I just, I came from nothing to achieve Olympic success, and now I'm back to square one. Like, what in the hell's going on? Right now, who do I go after, for this? Like, who's responsible for this? Right. I was not willing to take any accountability for any of it at the time. And so just, straight victim mentality and the blame game and, utilizing all the alcohol I could possibly find and, hanging out with not the right people. And, no, it was bad. It was really, really bad. And,
You reached the darkness that was,
I was pretty bad darkness, man.
yeah.
And, people hear this all the time, and I say this with my heart. So it's a darkness I would never, ever wish upon anyone because it was so bad. And, there wasn't a time throughout the day I didn't think about like killing myself. I had plans of just going up to the mountains and just letting myself go, and trying to create like, ways of just exiting out of this life. And thankfully that's when I connected to one of my business partners, Chad or Favor, and that TMIC, which stands for the most important conversation. And, he started, we connected on a completely different thing. We're talking about business and technology, and he had a technology he wanted to bring to the Olympic Committee, and, got done with that conversation. He's like, "Oh, hey, by the way, I'm actually going to do this stuff. I have a group called TMIC, stands for the most important conversation. And we're going to start beta testing this online training program if you're interested in it." And back then in 2018, he's like, "It's kind of like a life coaching, business coaching, but it comes from a very metaphysical, ontological standpoint. It focuses on the human being." And I thought it was just garbage at the time. Like when he was telling me about it, like, what are you talking about, right? But I had no other choice. I had nothing else left. And I was like, well, I'll join it. Why not? Let's see what happens.
Because you're pretty cynical by this point.
Oh yeah.
Just, everything, nothing mattered. Nothing,
Yeah.
that's stupid.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, because I was so good at like pulling myself out of holes all the time.
Yeah.
And this time I had dug a hole that there was no hope for me to get out of on my own. Yeah. There was no way. And, I clearly remember the very first conversation that we had on the Zoom call. I think there was 20 of us on there. And, I was living by myself up in Nogbin. I had 2 cats and a dog, isolated, all by myself. I'm sitting on this call, and Chad says, "Well, let me ask you guys this. Do you lead a life by default, or do you lead a life by design?" And I was like, what is he talking about? This sounds so stupid. And he's like, "Well, if you lead a life by design, then, things are going well, you've got a good job, or you have a big company, your relationships with your significant other, your kids, whatever, everything seems to be really, really good. You're in alignment." And that concept was so foreign to me. I had no idea what he was talking about. I just knew that wasn't me. And he said, "Well, and the opposite, if you lead life by default, then all those things I just talked about are probably not going well. Struggle relationships, alcoholic, might be a drug addict, your relationships with friends and families are soured, you're isolated, you're blaming everything on everyone else, finances suck." And I was like, "Yep, keep going, keep going." And I'm sitting here just checking off everything on my list. And I was like, that is absolutely to the 10th degree.
It's funny because I was saying this some kind of the same analogy, but I look at it as a pinball machine, right? Like I was the pinball bouncing off of everything, and the end result always is what? Falling in the old hole. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's how I felt. So it's kind of the same thing. You're just checking all the boxes of things
Yeah.
that you're like, okay, I bounced off that, and it just led me to fall in the hole again.
Yep. Yeah. And so when I realized that I was truly 100% living a life by default, the next thing resonated with me like significantly. Is like, well, if you lead life by default, which a lot of human population does in some way, shape, or form, means that they're not truly aligned with their purpose, or they don't know their purpose, whatever. He said it's not too late to take a look at the architecture in which you built, you're responsible for, and start to acknowledge the things that are not serving you, and start to declutter those one at a time. And I just went like, bing. Like that was the first light of hope I'd had in a long time, probably like since the Olympics. And I was like, just got back to like being super curious again. So you're saying there's a chance. And that's literally what I thought. Cause I tell people when I came across Chad, and I've had an opportunity to tell him this in the last couple of years, I was planning out my next suicide attempt because it was so bad. And that like literally was like a little light, a little spark that I needed to realize that my time on this earth wasn't done. I have a lot of work to do. And so
Saved your life.
yeah, saved my life, 100%. Yeah. And so I just literally attached to the TMIC principles, and some of it was literally foreign to me, but I was just trying to learn. And I've got literally a stack of notes at home, just listening to the, TMIC trainings, and one step at a time, I started to like rebuild myself with the help of other, people around me. I ended up like getting rid of everything that I owned up in Ogden. I literally gave it away. Moved back down here to Salt Lake to surround myself with more healthy, influential people and some more mentors. And again, it would have to take one step at a time, because even though you want this, if you're down here, it's a process, right? You slowly got to build, you got to get rid of stuff, you got to find new practices, you got to learn more stuff until you eventually get to where you want to be. But this is not an endpoint. It's ongoing, right? And so I was still dealing with a lot of legal stuff, a lot of relationship stuff, and just realized that, this is going to be a process. And I had to almost put my mind frame in a space that this is like my next Olympics. Let's give it 4 years and see where we're at 4 years from now. And let's give it another 4 years and see where we're at, for now. And that was in 2018. So now
You're on your second 4-year stint.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's,
The trend that I hear in I think so many people when they're down and they feel they're in your life, you could probably go through times, and you've already mentioned a few of them, where somebody was there for you, right? Or there was a resource that even by accident that you happened upon, and you said, "This, I need this right now."
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the hardest thing is find people. I think so many people, maybe they don't see the resources, maybe they're there, they don't know how to access them. Maybe they're running into people by accident, but they don't know that that's what they need. All right. And the part that you say about being curious, and that's, you know, I think that's where, having hope, when you don't have hope, you are not curious about anything. Right. Yeah. So somebody that's suffering, somebody that's in the dark part, and maybe they don't run across somebody, like you did, that was just there. Were you seeking out other ways, anything to try to pull yourself out of it, or were you just kind of stuck?
no, I was checked out. Yeah. I was 100% checked out. Uh, I literally had written letters to my family, kind of giving them like the full spectrum of everything that's going on. I still have that letter. And I was pining my exit strategy 100%.
Yeah.
And, again, whether you want to say it's God or Buddha or the universal energy, it's a blessing for me to come across Chad, and now I'm a partner in the company.
Love it. I love it. Well, it's funny because, I think everyone has to believe in something at some point, whether it's like you said, whether it's God, whether it's, whatever that is. For me, when I took the path less traveled, I suppose, right? The one that was not with alcohol, the harder one for people like us, I had to have something that I could sort of like hold on to. And that sort of spiritual aspect of my life helped with that like a ton.
Yeah.
Right. Otherwise, I don't know that I could have. I think that my first resource that I grabbed onto, because literally I had nobody around. I moved from California to here.
Right.
Right. I went from,
I like for you dreaming.
yeah, getting crazy, having fun, right? And I came here, and none of my family understand. Right? All my family, very pretty straight laced people. They didn't have any idea what I was going through out there. Right. And so they didn't have any way to understand what I was going through here. And so I had to hold on to that spiritual thing, like, and whatever, however you define that. For me, it's God, right? I held on to that. I needed to like believe that somebody had my back and understood what I was going through, right? So even just that, like for me, nobody else could understand me.
Yeah.
And I was too scared to talk about what I had gone through, too ashamed to talk about what I had gone through. Um, but that was what I could grab onto right then that made me feel positive about things and how things could go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, there's so much gold in what you're saying right there too, right? Is even going back to like talking about why people don't see what might be right in front of them, right? Is because they feel too ashamed, right? They don't want to tell anyone else, even though there's thousands of other people around the world going through similar situations. In their mind, they get to that space where it's like, oh, it's just me, it's only happening to me, right? So they don't see the opportunities right in front of them, and speaking about God, when I was in that space and when I was talking with Chad initially, I was having the neighbors, like, we live in a very LDS state. So there's a lot of, at the time there was an LDS church kitty corner from me. And when I started doing the work with TMIC, I started just kind of doing an accountability exercise for myself, saying, okay, what are some of the things that you've heard of people do in their life that have really helped them that you aren't doing? And I'm going through everything. And the one thing that I've always been spiritual, always prayed, But the one thing I'd never really truly committed to was my relationship with God, Heavenly Father, whatever we're called.
Yeah.
And I started off with, going to the LDS church, because I was baptized when I was 19. And I'm thankful that the church is there. Later on in life, 2.5 years ago, whatever it was, when I met my wife, I decided that, that wasn't the church for me. I believe in, I truly believe in what they do, and I love what they do. But when I walked into the church, it just wasn't, I didn't get the feeling that I'm seeking, that I wanted to feel. And so we kind of played around with like experiencing going to some different places, and came across the Rock Church. And when I walked in, my wife and I, when I walked in the Rock Church, we just like almost started crying. Like, it was just whatever that feeling was, and we're like, this is where we could be. And so, in combination of me doing the work, TMIC training, and I trained with Jack Hadfield, off the founder of all the Chicken for Your Soup for Your Soul books. And then things were going well. But once I opened up myself, and again, whether you want to think he's real or not, or God or whatever, there's an energy around us that we just need to lean on to help us get through things. And once I opened myself up, that's when things really started to roll on for me. And it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
You can literally see it in my daily, activity of how well things started happening for me. But
Well, in the 2.5 years, right? I mean, a really short period of time. How long it took you to get from the start of your life, like where you were kind of on the streets and being kind of a dumb kid, all the way to Olympics? Yeah, we're talking about years of time, years of years and years and years. But you knew how to build back. You had that. Like, we don't forget that, right? If you're able to pull yourself out of the hole, which you did, and you used resources even by accident. At one, the first one was by accident, but then you grabbed on and you did something different. But you, in 2.5 years, you built yourself back to a point.
yeah,
That's really, if from a mental health perspective and from like a spiritual perspective, probably leagues beyond where you were, even when you were standing on the podium as an Olympia.
significantly.
Yeah.
And that was the, again, being curious. When I started seeing the little lights of hope with, the TMIC stuff and the Jack Canfield stuff, and then my relationship with God, and I started seeing the path, I was like, I am, my own personal relationship, I made a pact that said, if this is true and this works out, I will give you every bit of me every single day. And I did. And I wanted to also, hopefully be an example or a role model to humanity, that you could do whatever you want. I don't care where you started. If you started in the gutter and you want to be a CEO of a company in a couple of years, you could do it, but there is a way to do it, right? And you can't, I always say, you can't build an architecture of new with a foot still in the one of an old one who never worked, right? So holding on to past friends and unhealthy relationships, you can't do that and expect to be successful. You got to fully commit. And no, not a lot of people are going to do it in 2.5 years. But I was super determined and extremely curious, and just wanted to get back on the track I felt like I should belong to. Yeah, and start rebuilding myself, rebuilding my relationship with my family and friends and my kids, and start working on what I wanted to work on, which is my legacy. So when I died, people will look back and be like, wow, look at what this guy, was able to create twice. Yeah.
Right? They're ice. And that's the thing. Like, to me, that is the most like captivating part about your story, is that you created something special, amazing, right? World class, twice.
Yeah. Well, it is,
You've had the chance to do it
yeah.
twice.
My son's mom even, she's pretty awesome. She even said, I don't get it. And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, you have faced some of the most intense adversity I've ever seen in someone's life. Now, it hasn't been the worst out of anything that's happened in the world, but it's been pretty intense. She's like, but you always find a way. You always find a way to get up, dust yourself off, create, and level up again and again and again. And that was a nice comment to hear from her, right?
Especially knowing that you had such a rough,
Yeah.
you'd done some things that maybe she wouldn't,
Yeah.
you know.
And so that was pretty neat to hear that from her. And now I'm on a roll where I'm like, no more falling down. Yeah, we've built this amazing architecture of life, and let's just keep adding to it. Take the accountability, right? And I'm constantly checking in with myself and checking in with my wife and people around me, and thankfully, even some of my business partners, or that want to tell me to step away from the technology companies because they weren't serving me anymore. And that next day, I came into one of our meetings, and at the end of the meeting, I was telling my team, I was like, "Oh, hey guys, by the way, I stepped away from the technology companies." They're like, "We knew something was different about you, right?" And they got super excited and just re-energized my team there, and we've been able to create another really amazing company from it. So
One of the things, too, that I think, like, you can't, what I've realized, and I'm a slow learner. Okay.
yeah,
I have to beat my head against the wall just to get simple concepts. And one thing that I've realized, and what it's kind of great what you're talking about, is that we don't do this alone.
no,
Right? It's not possible to forge a kind of life that we're talking about by ourselves.
yeah,
You still have to check in with the
oh,
resources. You still have to hold on to the things that are making you great, and also be the person that somebody else, like, fill the bucket back.
yeah,
Right. And I forgot about that part for such a long period in my life, because when you're a drunk, you're not thinking about anybody else,
just yourself.
just yourself. You're in survival mode the whole time.
Yep.
Right. And when I started to be able to, when I thought about a two-way street, like, I don't need to just take, but I can give more even than I take. Those resources were even more plentiful because they saw me as a resource now, right? And they wanted to be a resource. It becomes this collaborative life effort, which, that's kind of like the sweet spot, right? Where you're giving back as much as you're taking in, and you feel like you're collaborating now with the resources and the people that at one point were pulling you up.
Yeah.
you know, and now you're giving back to that.
Yeah, that's and through this process early on, one of the things that I worked on with Chad and with Jack Canfield was trying to figure out what was my purpose, what is my why, and for me, it finally came. It came to, and it took some while, took a little while. Found that like my number one pillar of focus was to be at service hours. And that was the one thing that was missing me. I spent so many years of my career focusing on just me to be the greatest athlete I possibly could. When I retired, I was like, wait a minute, I got to somehow flip the switch here now. And it's been like, and again, it was one of those things that I challenged my higher power. Like, okay, if being of service truly works, I'm going to test this out. Yeah, and basically he was like, well, let's go for it. And I've tested it out, and it works. You know,
It is amazing. It changes, and even when you're in a dark place, and I tell people this, because it's really hard to look outside of yourself when you're in that dark place. I think if you're having a hard time finding the what to grab onto, serve somebody, right?
yeah,
Because that will change your perspective, even if it's just for the slightest period of time. Right? Feel something different, right? A little bit of light, like a little bit of gratitude, or something that that gets outside of yourself just a little bit. You can. It's something that if you're curious, if you it make you feel hope,
yeah,
and feel some curiosity about, oh my gosh, maybe I should try,
right,
this again.
yeah,
Right. And then you sort of that sort of snowballs, because you now start to create a positive network around yourself,
yeah,
rather than being stuck in that dark place.
yeah.
So if resources don't just pop into your life like you had, in 2018, you can create that by getting outside of yourself for just the smallest period of time. Go mow somebody's lawn,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Whatever.
Help somebody
Go
go.
help grandma walk across.
Exactly. Haul on a bag of groceries, because at that point you're outside of yourself just for that slightest little bit of time.
I actually had a client last week. I've been working with him for a while. Very high level, belongs to a Fortune 100 company. And he's just like, I'm miserable at work and my life sucks and blah, blah, blah. And so we're kind of navigating some stuff, and we're trying to schedule his next meeting. He's like, oh, next week I'm going to be gone because I'm going to go up north. He's in California. He's like, I'm going to go up north. My buddy has some things that he's struggling with, his job and all that stuff. And I said, oh, cool, great. If I can help you, let me know. And he's like, you're not going to tell him not to go? I'm like, no, go ahead, go. Because I knew, right, if he goes up there and if it works out right, he's going to take some of the language and the practices that we're practicing and hopefully implement it with his friend. And he came back and I was like, so how soon is your friend? He's like, man, I was listening to you and I just wanted to do what I could to serve him. And it made me realize how bad my life really wasn't. He's like, my life is not as bad as I thought it was. He's like, so it's helped me really get clarity on like, my life isn't as bad as what I created it in my head. And he's like, now I have a little bit more hope and focus to like start to level up more and more again. So the whole service thing is absolutely a great tool. Yeah. And if you don't know, man, there's lots of nonprofits always looking for people to come volunteer and help. Yeah. Here in Salt Lake, they haven't announced it yet, but there's going to be volunteers for the Olympics in 2034, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, church, homeless, like
Suicide hotlines. The deals all kinds, just tons of things that you could do. Honestly, for me, like that's one of the great parts about, sort of a spiritual aspect to the whole healing thing is that it sort of is, their charity is the pure love of Christ, right? Like service, right? And so it sort of goes hand in hand, and it made me feel more compelled to serve, right?
right.
Just because of that ideation, right?
Yeah.
And man, it was so cathartic, so healing, so cathartic, just something where I was like, oh my gosh, this feels amazing. And it wasn't the spiritual part of it. That's what prompted me to get to that point. It was the actual act of helping somebody else outside of myself, right?
Oh yeah. I can, it is almost like clockwork. If things start going south in my life or business or whatever, I can attribute it directly to like how much service have I done to the baby. Yeah. And then I'll be like, okay, I need to like figure out like, is there someone else I can help? Can I coach somebody for free or, whatever. But it literally like, it's like it's almost like an algorithm. I just know that the more I serve, the better my life is going to continue to get.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. And you can't get to that point. Like it takes a while to understand that. Yeah. For me anyways. Oh, look, we were really great at it.
No, it took me a while. And I feel like I'm really good at it now, but back then I honestly thought it was BS. I thought it was absolute BS.
Same thing.
Right. And all this conversation that we're having right now about, being spiritual or be a God-fearing man and all that stuff, I was like, that's all BS. Yeah. That's what I thought back to 2018. And because I had no light of hope, I was like, I'll give it a shot. What do I have to lose at this point in time? I'm ready to check out. What if it does work?
Yeah.
What if I figured out a way to be of service? What if I figured out a way to commit more to God or the universal power, whatever people want to identify with? What if this does work? Yeah. What will that look like? And I said, whatever. Let's just go for it. How's that enough student stuff?
Let's do something else.
Let's do something different. If what you do it doesn't work, and do something different.
And look what it looks like.
It's what it looks like. It's been super amazing.
Yeah.
I'm so lucky and so blessed. And I shouldn't even say lucky because, work had to be put in.
Sure.
Right. We created a buck. And I am even stunned at like what I've been able to create in these last 6 years, whatever it's been. Yeah. And it just continues. And we walked in here, I was telling you about, I left 3 tech companies that weren't serving me, and also I got 5 brand new consulting clients in the tech space. I have one client's like, you know what? She's like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, well, what do you want to do with the company? She's like, you can have it. And I'm like, what? So I'm trying to figure that out.
Oh my goodness, loud, right? But when you're doing good things.
Yeah. And then, a couple of weeks ago, got a phone call of you. I don't know if you saw the social media getting inducted into.
I did see that.
Of the Hall of Fame next week.
Congratulations, man. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been.
It was like Placid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, that's amazing, man.
And it's been a hot minute since I've been back there, so it'll be a good trip down memory lane for sure.
And that's the site of the Miracle hockey team, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. That 1980 hockey team. Yeah. That's yeah. When you hear Lake Placid, you think that's what you hear. But also there was a great bobsled. There was a great bobsled team that year too, wasn't there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That was one of the. Anyways, that's amazing, dude. Congratulations on that.
It's been awesome and being able to start pulling like family members closer together and I don't want to say building a family, just rebuilding it. I just I lead a real nice life now.
One of the things that you said though is you're always looking, like evaluating, right? And Socrates, I think it was Socrates that said, an unexamined life is not worth living.
Yeah.
Right. We have to keep looking always, especially people that have demons on our back that we are fighting off all the time. If we stop looking, we stop examining who we are and what we're doing and keeping us, in the lane. Cause this isn't bumper bowling, right? We can't hit the gutter again.
Absolutely.
Right. And so like, it's a good thing to continue to analyze the trajectory that we're on because it can change. For me, it could change with one drink.
Yep.
In 1 second, everything could change.
Yep.
Right. So I think like the unexamined life is pretty worthless.
Yeah.
Right. You gotta keep looking.
Yeah.
Otherwise bad things can sneak up.
Yeah. No, and I always tell people, I frame it up a little bit different, the same thing. I embrace all the chaos that's happening in my life. I know that there's evil energy around me all the time. Like I've had experiences to prove it. And I just choose to embrace it and know it's there. And I literally have conversations like, nah, you're like, I win this one. Like, period. Well, yeah, fuck it out. And
Yeah.
I'm not gonna get out of here, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always tell people like, I might be the craziest person because I'm always constantly having these conversations with myself. But it's me keeping in alignment and taking that accountability, right? Because at the end of the day, it is your responsibility.
Yeah. That's right.
It is, and it is hard too because sometimes we get in those dark spaces. I want to lean on someone else, help me, right? But you could only help me so far, right? I still have to make a choice to like put the action into action and do all the things that need to happen. And
You got to own it. Like you got to, and I love to have part ownership in people's, like I love it if people are helping me own it.
Yeah.
Help me own it. Right. But it's still mine to own. Right. But sometimes sometimes people don't have that to give to you. You have to own it yourself sometimes.
Yeah.
Like you got to fight yourself out of that day, that rough day that you're having, because I mean, doesn't matter how great the life gets, the days still get dark sometimes.
they do.
Yeah.
And it's it's interesting too. Like even when I work with a new client, and we're kind of going through that first initial conversation about what is this going to look like. I always tell them like, listen, if there is a day that let's say you just had an absolutely horrible day, and you don't want to do any of the coaching, you just need to complain and they'll allow, then I'll be that soundboard for you because I know what it's like.
Yeah.
I said, don't worry about it. Just when we jump on the call, be like, today's been one of those days, and I'll just let you unpack whatever you done about. And I've found that very helpful. One, for me,
Right.
helps me really appreciate my life. But two, like sometimes people just need to let it out, but they have to let it out to the right person who could understand it and then also help unpack that so we can figure out a game plan to move forward and do it in a healthier ways.
And that's kind of comes back to that service component. You're not just coaching, but you're actually serving their needs at that moment. Right. And so it's just kind of like that thing. You're outside of yourself now. You're not in survival mode. You can give and be, and it creates such it just buoys you up to do that. And so you're creating good days for you by listening to people that are having rough days.
Yeah.
And then I think also like you have I haven't met your wife, but I know I mean, from what you tell me, she's just a goddess, and I'm sure she is. But she is that sounding board for you sometimes. Yeah, you're that for her, because you guys are both traveling a road that is difficult to travel, right? So it's nice to have that, and not everyone has it. And so for me, I have the same, I could go home and talk about a crappy day that you helpful and tell my wife, like, I feel like drinking today.
Yeah.
And she's not going to judge me.
Right.
I can tell I'm very open with my kids. I can tell my kids I felt like drinking today, kids, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Because I value what we have.
Yeah.
More than that.
Yeah.
That
was, funny. You touched upon something right there that I think is also a very, very important topic. And that's be honest. Yeah. More important is yourself. Secondly, importantly for people around you. And, I used to tell a ton of white lies all the time. And it took me probably about 2.5 years of like always reminding myself, just be honest. Yeah. Just be honest. Just be honest. And because I built over the years, right? It took a long time of building up these little white lies to cover up the BS of, good example. Oh, I can't go to work today because I'm sick. No, that's not the truth. Can't go to work today. You would stay up to drink all night in your underwear. That's right, right? And that was another hard practice for me too. Is truly being 100% honest. And it helped me, one, be honest with my family and friends so they can understand who I was by then. And now I've built the practice where I was like, hey, just want you to know, I am super honest. I hope I don't offend you, but I'm going to give it to you real. But yeah.
And you should, especially with what you're doing, like, because other people, it inspires other people to be honest. When they hear your honesty. Yeah. I set up in front, I have, a bunch of agents that I manage here, right? Um, and I stood up in front, I'm telling you, like, I don't know what brought this out, like why this happened, but I stood up in front of them and I told them who I am at my core. That I am a guy that fights alcohol addiction every single day. Right. And I think it took a lot of them by surprise, but also it humanizes you.
Yeah.
You're a guy, you have stature, you've done amazing things. And on the surface, you're somebody that's unshakable.
Yeah.
Right. When people see, and that's almost like, I don't know, like it's not on the same level as I am, but when they see your inside, they see your honesty, it humanizes you. And also I had people come up after me saying, I'm 26 years sober. Yes, you might, like it. I had no idea. I didn't know that about this person, and it makes other people feel empowered to talk about the demons that they're fighting. Yeah. I'm a slow learner, but I am learning that to talk about these things is empowering for me and therapeutic for me, but also empowers other people.
Yeah.
Just to, and frees them.
Yeah.
To say the things that they need to say that help them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I had that, I've had that several times too now, but one of my most impactful situations like that, this is after my 2016 suicide attempt, which was an attempt I really tried to, but thankfully survived. Thankfully. And I remember, Dave Austin. I know the name. Yeah, you'll probably know if I'm sure he is. Anyways, he was having an event at his house, and it was kind of a masquerade party, but it had to do with suicide and mental health and all that stuff. And he and I were talking about doing some business together, pretend, fun enough. And he's like, hey, I'm having this event at my house next week. It's, addresses suicide and depression, and, I'd love for you to come. And I had not talked to anybody about my suicide attempt at this point in time. My family, because they were there in the hospital. And I said, well, it's pretty interesting, Dave. Let me tell you something and tell you why I don't want to come. So I told him my story. He's like, you would be the perfect person to come and tell your story. And I was like, absolutely not. There's absolutely no way in hell I'm going to get up there in front of people I know, in front of very influential people here in Utah, and tell them that my mental health is out the door, and I was suicidal, or I attempted suicide and ended up in the hospital and was supposed to go to the psych ward. I said, not doing it, Dave. And I went home that night and I prayed. And next morning I woke up with this message saying, you know what, for as many people you help with your story of with kid coming from the streets to the Olympics, you're going to help so many more people by being vulnerable in their space and telling them about your mental health issues. I was just like, and so I called Dave and I said, Dave, I'll do it. And he was super ecstatic. And I remember walking, just so nervous the whole time, driving to his house and seeing all these people and, political figures, high level business figures that I knew of and of. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to ruin my career right here. But I told Dave I would, and I told God I'd ever do it. And guess I'll just go for it. And then we're getting out there and telling people about my story. We all still had masks on. Right? Because the whole thing was like, let's take off the mask of shame, right? And that's what we had to do at the end of the event. But I'm telling my story, and I can literally see tears coming down everybody's face. And there's 200 plus people at his house. And the whole time I'm thinking, this is not good. And I wrapped up my story. People clapped. I was a hot mess emotionally. I went outside and back by his pool, and I just let it all out. And I thought, man, I just heard everything. And to my surprise, one person after another, nonstop, comes out and he said, Billy, we are so grateful that you told your story and you were vulnerable enough to tell your story, because I have a story like yours. And I never thought it was okay to talk about it. But if you can talk about your story, I feel like I now have the power to talk about mine. And I just went, what? And that's when I truly decided to become a super vulnerable human and not hide anything and not lie and be honest, because you never know who that's going to help.
And this is exactly why, like, I want everyone to know out there that you can say the hard things and people around you, not everyone's going to get it, but there's somebody out there that's going to say, and it's probably more than you would ever imagine. That's going to be like, oh my gosh, that's me. Right. And if it can happen to him, if he can say it, I can say it.
Yeah.
Right. And get it out and start to heal from those things. You can't heal with that when the infection is stuck inside you.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
What an incredible moment. And that was where it all, like, that's when you decided, and now I can talk about.
Massive pivotal point. Yeah. And I still have people today, because I've done some lives on social media and talked about it, and I'm actually due to do some more. But I've had random people across the country I don't even know call me in a very dark moment. I've had a couple of people call me and say, "Hey, I'm literally planning on kill myself right now. Do you have the slightest talk? You don't know who I am." I said, "Yep, I'll stop whatever I'm doing right now and let's chat." Yeah. And, and it's a hard conversation, but it's a blessing. And also at the same time to be able to just help somebody you don't even know, and just take that time out of your day to do that for them. So,
Yeah. Can you introduce a little bit about, your coaching, the things that you do to help people, how they can the access talk to?
yeah. So, I guess one of the things that I started doing back in 2018 was obviously getting certified through TMIC. And I've been doing TMIC since like I said, 2018, nonstop all the time. So even though I know the entire program, I still sit in the groups in the classes, and I teach some of the classes. Got certified through Jack in his executive leadership training. Done some stuff in the mental health space. Also decided to go to Dartmouth and did a certification in executive management as well, and just started going into consulting first. That's what first thing I did, is start consulting companies on corporate culture, and because the reality is corporate culture is not exactly what people think it is around the countries, but yeah, corporate America. And from that, I started getting tapped into working with athletes first and helping them with their mindset, because they have stuff that's going on as well. All that is just sort of filtering out to individuals and organizations. And so now I have a super duper diverse portfolio, if you want it. I don't even like calling my clients. They're human beings I collaborate with. Yeah. Right. And the beauty of it is I've been through a lot of the stuff. I've been through it multiple times, and I've found ways to overcome that. And so I'm thankful that I have an opportunity to be there for other people, help them navigate the choppy waters of their life, and help them understand that there is hope. And, together we'll figure this out. And I always try and tell them, I'll say, listen, my goal is in 6 months, you don't know. Yeah, I don't want to be your coach forever. I bet if I do, I'm here. But I always tell them, I said, we'll work on it for 6 months to a year, depending on, how quickly people learn, and then start to implement stuff. Mine's like 20, right? Yeah. And I say, and then after that, my goal is to be a mentor, and you just check in with me every time. And so I've had some, clients that we're talking about right now that are just dealing with mental health. And I've had a top 10 company in the world say, do realize the stuff we're talking about is going to change our actual shares. And I was like, when they said that, I was like, oh, wow, I didn't think about that. But just super blessed to be where I'm at today and be able to give back and serve and learn from everyone else. I always tell my collaborative partners, my clients, wherever you want to call them, that I'm here to learn as much from them as I hope to get from them. So,
Well, I appreciate you a lot. One of the things I just, the thing that connects me a lot with Billy is he sees value in the people around him, and you can feel it when he talks about his stuff. And the thing about that I find the most amazing about that is that at one point he saw no value in himself. Yeah. But people around him did, right? And so everybody that's listening, you should know that there are people around you that see the value in you. They do. But I promise you, every human being on this earth has value.
yeah.
And if you're not seeing it in yourself, talk to the people around you about what you're going through. Find some resources to validate that value, because it doesn't matter how low you are. It doesn't matter how much you're drooling in the gutter drunk like I was. I still had value. You and me both, even though it felt like I was lost.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. I you talk about gutter drunk. I did that at a White House visit when I was competing. I got so drunk I passed out in Baltimore. I don't even know how I got to my hotel, but there were people around that were like, willing to help me out, get me back to the hotel, and and that's what the reality is. That is what life is about, is how we can serve one another to help rise another level.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, man. But look, thanks so much for, dude. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was awesome.